This is Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Inspiring and providing real insight to our listeners with every story. Exploring deep stories behind every guest. Please welcome your host, Bo Tiffany.
Connor, thanks for coming on Digital Voices today. How are you doing, sir?
My pleasure. I'm actually doing great, kind of relaxed towards the end of the day.
It's always a good place to be.
Right.
You know, you began your career at a very young age. Could you share your earliest memories with working on TV commercials and perhaps how that shaped your interest in acting?
Yeah, before I even realized what that was a possible career is I was born in New Mexico.
Mm.
And my grandfather was a cameraman for Television City, which is in Hollywood, where they film The Price is Right or videotape it now, and all those soap operas and stuff. So he was a cameraman, and we had gone out there as we usually did for summer, and I was probably maybe 5 years old, and my grandfather would hang out with a bunch of the grips and the tattooed gruff guys from the production. They would usually go and eat at a Greasy Spoon for lunch, right? And he thought it'd be a great idea to bring the grandkid along. So he asked me a strange question. You have to remember this is the 70s. And he said, so Winnie the Pooh was huge. And he asked me if I would like to meet Winnie the Pooh. Well, what kid in the 70s would not want to meet Winnie the Pooh? I said, of course. So I went with him. And it's still strange to me to even put this together, how this happened. You had a bunch of grips and tech advisor, whatever they were. They ran heavy weights for the microphones, the booms, and all that stuff. But amongst that group that would join them occasionally for lunch was a character actor by the name of Sterling Holloway, who was the voice of Winnie the Pooh. I have no idea why he hung out with them. He was completely opposite of them. Anyway, he was there. And so, I'm looking everywhere for Winnie the Pooh, show up at this place. And my grandfather introduced me to Sterling Holloway. And he had a real soft really strange voice coming out of a man. And it sounded like Winnie the Pooh. And my little 5-year-old brain couldn't understand what was going on. So he explained, I'm the voice of Winnie the Pooh. And, so we kind of talked a little bit. And I guess when I got into my hamburger or whatever, he asked my grandfather, hey, does your grandson do any British accents? And my grandfather, without even batting an eye, I said, yes, of course. Yeah, he does a British accent. Well, I didn't do anything like that. Well, after we left or whatever, and I get back and he's talking to my dad saying we need to, apparently their Christopher Robin grew up. So they no longer had a Christopher Robin, and they were going to do these, what were called Disney storyteller records and, cassettes and that sort of thing with these characters. And he said, Sterling Holloway wants Connor to audition, but he's got to do a British accent. So him and my dad worked for like 3 months to get me to do it was horrible. I sounded worse than Dick Van Dyke on Mary Poppins. Hello, Mike. It was horrible. Absolutely horrible. So I went to the audition, and I think because Mr. Holloway put in a good word for me, I got the audition, and that was how it all began. And it's just that I remember my earliest recording or memory is that recording session with some of the greats. And a lot of them were, come from film, early film and of course the days of radio. So all those character actors like Sebastian Cabot, Sterling Holloway, and Junius Matthews, and Paul Winchell, and so many others. And we all together, we had to be there at the same time back in those days. And they were looking for a young Christopher Robin. I was so young, I couldn't read. They'd had to whisper my lines to me, and then I would repeat in this horrible British accent that a kid from New Mexico trying to do a British accent could muster. It was horrible, but it got me the gig and got me my SAG card. So that was my earliest memory, a very positive memory. It's like I yearn for those days when we still could do that. Now we record our parts independent, or I may not ever meet someone who's else is in the cast. I may
Mm,
not even know what they look like.
sure.
That's often the case now.
Does that affect like any kind of ad libbing or development? I often think, when you're working together, sometimes, you have those ad lib moments and they're like, wow, that was great. And they end up sticking it in.
Without a doubt. It's like now those guys being separate, those guys came from radio. And so they would often get through a scene with no mistakes because they're used to doing for radio. And so they had very few errors. They were on top of it. And most of them did not ad lib because they were just, straight actors coming off the script. Moving forward in my career in the 70s, it became a very, with the advent of, of Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters and all these kind of coming into television, ad lib was a great, it added so much humanness and naturalness to a script. So a lot of sessions that we would do, both animation and otherwise, you get a lot of energy feeding off of other people, having them in the room and seeing their face and watching them. It was like in the old days when we were in school and the teacher would hand us a book and we were all supposed to you play Billy and he's going to play Mr. So and so, and it's just like that.
Mm.
And so often it was great to read off of the other character that you would be able to get this energy from it. And you're right. And now we don't have that. We have to imagine and kind of ad lib on our own, hoping that it will kind of naturally fit with what they're doing. So yeah, I miss that.
Well, and I figure when you put that with the CGI acting for sets these days, it's difficult to react to a ball on a stick sometimes.
It
So,
sure is. Yeah, that there's a whole division now within acting. It's called mocap, motion capture, and so there's a lot of voice talent that not only do voiceover, but they also do motion cap. I'm not in the type of shape to do to do all the running around and stuff like a lot of these guys do, but that you are absolutely right. Be able to react to something that's not there and pretend that that ball is a dragon and it's coming for that
mhm.
is you're having to go down to the very roots of your acting and pull out the fear of oh my gosh, it's right in front of me.
Yeah. So you're from New Mexico. Big family, small family?
Pretty big family. Yeah, there was 6 of us kids. I was the baby, so I was unexpected. In fact, the one closest to me, she's almost 17 years older. That shows she was in high school when I came along.
Hmm.
And my mom wasn't feeling well, went to the doctor, and the first doctor says, I think you have cancer. And her and my dad didn't want to take that, believing it. So they went to another doctor. And this lady said, how many babies have you had? And she said, well, I've had 5 kids. And she goes, well, then you of all people should know you're pregnant. You don't have cancer. Now, this is the 70s. My mom said, this is 1971. So my mom said, well, I'm 39. I can't be pregnant. And the woman said, you can. And yes, you are. And so, yeah, I was the surprise baby. I kind of felt, it's like that was a whole other family. I felt like I was like an only kid because they all
Age
had that.
difference.
I never knew what it was like to have a brother or a sister, even though I did, but they
Mhm.
were adults. In fact, one of my oldest sisters already had kids. My nephews were 17 days older than I was, somewhere around there. So my nephews are older than I am. So when I grew up, it was like I felt like an only kid because uh they were just another family. All the pictures were of a family that I didn't see. My parents didn't look the same. It
Mhm.
was it was bizarre. It was like I was transplanted to a different family. And then they were all jealous because I was the only kid in with the parents. Well, they fought for every moment of their attention as they were growing up. So yeah,
Yeah.
a big family in New Mexico of all places.
So with a big family, even though they weren't necessarily immediately there, a lot of support in terms of your career.
At first it was a confusion. I'll never forget my dad. It was fun as we all did this little record and that sort of thing. And as I was getting a little bit older, I had continued. I still have the same agent. She's been my agent since I was a child.
Wow.
Joni Venari. So she's, I tell people she's older than Methuselah, which, she doesn't really like, but she's been like my second mom. My mom passed away when I was, in my late 20s. So Joni has been kind of like my mom because for a lot of the time, I was on my own out in LA as a child, and my parents had to live their life in New Mexico. And I had to stay out in LA to film. And 6 months of the year, we'd fly to New York and I would film Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and stuff like that. So a lot of the time, I felt like I didn't have any family.
Mm.
And so the only person that kind of kept me grounded was Joni a lot of the time. A lot of the life's lessons of, trying to get me to, how to tie my shoe, stuff like that. It was her that was teaching me that. But my dad could not understand as I got older. What do you want to do for a living? I said, well, I want to be an actor. He's like, well, how are you going to live? How are you going to feed yourself? And they're like, by acting.
Hmm.
So at first it didn't seem like a real, unless you're James Dean or James Garner or someone like, you can't, how are you going to make a living? Come on. But I explained to him there's a whole group of people that, make a living doing voiceover. And the very thing I would get in trouble for in school for doing, they're making a living doing it,
Hmm.
you know? So yeah, they eventually came to grips with that and complete support. Absolutely. Yeah, probably in the 80s, we did a series of commercials for Flintstone vitamins. And I was the announcer, as I'd come on and say something like, now a new chewables or something like that. But I remember at the session, I was probably 16 at the time, maybe. But when they filmed the commercials, they were trying to get it to where a little girl, she sings at the very end. And the girl that they had hired was great on camera. She did everything perfect, but she couldn't sing. And the very end jingle was, I can't sing either, but it was like, 15 million strong and growing. That was the line, right? Well, she couldn't do that, just like I couldn't do it. However, being Hollywood, there is someone that can do that. They went out and got Patricia Bright, who was a wonderful older actress at the time, who did voiceovers and specialized in doing children's voices. And they cast her. So me and her were in the studio laying down tracks, and she would come up and she sounded just like a 5-year-old with just these little nuances to not perfect, but just how a 5-year-old would deliver that line. And between breaks, Pat looked at me and said, you know what? This is the perfect career. She goes, I can show up to this place in my damn wheelchair because the voice is the last to go. And, that stuck with me. It's like even, a famous story of Mel Blanc at the time he was the voice of Barney Rubble for the Flintstones. He was in a horrible, horrible accident that they didn't think he would live through. And this, for many, many years, this was not known to the public in general because, back then the public didn't care, who the voice of, that's a cartoon, who cares? But anyway, Mel was the voice of Barney, and that was a very successful, it was like The Simpsons have become. At that time, it was huge ratings. And, well, he was in a hospital. He was in a coma for a long, long time, and they didn't think he would live. When he came out of the coma, as soon as Hanna-Barbera saw that he could talk, they moved the recording studio to him, and they went up there and recorded Barney Rubble's lines so that they wouldn't miss an episode. And with his leg in a cast, and he was totally immobile from his bed, he would he would do Barney Rubble. And there's if you Google it, there's some fantastic photos on the internet of Mel Blanc in the bed with some of his other co-stars, Alan Reed, who was the voice of Fred Flintstone at the time. They're all around there doing just as if it was in a studio in Hollywood. And I don't know if it's true, but it makes a good story. Apparently, when he was under the coma, they couldn't get him to come out, no matter how much they talked to him, no matter what they did. And supposedly, this was a story that Mel shared many a time. The doctor apparently went to him and thought, maybe if I don't talk to Mel, maybe if I talk to one of the characters. And so the line goes is that he went and said, "Hey, Bugs, are you in there? Are you okay?" And supposedly that's when Mel said, "Hey, what's up, Doc?" "Hey, what's up, Doc?"
That's
That,
great. Yeah.
I'm sure that's not completely 100% true, but man, it's a great story. I wish that it was.
Yeah.
In my mind, it is true.
It's amazing. You've touched on it a little bit, but what prompted the transition from on-camera acting to voiceover, and how was that process for you?
So, my mom really enjoyed me working in Hollywood and doing on camera. So, at that time I did a lot of TV series in the 70s and including Little House on the Prairie and Sesame Street and various things. And I enjoyed them. It was always interesting to be a part of it. Little House in particular because, it's like an hour north of Los Angeles, so we had to get up really early to be on the set and all this hubbub of making sure you're in makeup and then in costume, and then you'd stand around for 4 or 5 hours before they would shoot, maybe at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then by the time you got home you got to get to bed and then be up the next morning. It made for a long day, especially for a child. I think that in a lot of ways I didn't have a childhood because I was spent time on sets doing television or doing movies or commercials or whatever, and I think that I enjoyed it and everything, but it was one thing that Michael Landon had said too. He'd gathered a bunch of us up on the set one day and said he was looking around and he said, "Nah, I don't see any James Deans, no Paul Newmans or Liz Taylors. Yeah, I think that all of you are going to grow up to be big, fat, and ugly. So if you want to stay in Hollywood, you're probably going to have to find something else to do." And I mean, we were all like shocked, because we're all
Yeah.
back then we're all tiny and thin and pretty and all that stuff. And he said, one of the kids said, "Well, why are you here?" And he said, "Well, I'm glad you asked. I can write, I can direct, I can produce, I can cast, I can go build that set over there, I can run the camera, I can do a lot of things. That's why I'm here. And because I've been here since I was a kid, I've got the money." And he said, "So you've got to," he paired us up with other people on the set, like the sound guy or the film guy, to learn their craft so that even if we might not be actors when we grew up, because he had been a teenage actor, he knew what it was like. We would find something that would connect with that we could do. And so almost all of us, all of the cast of the kids from Little House grew up doing various roles in Hollywood. Not all, but some. But we were all pretty much safe from, the Hollywood bad vibe of child actors and a lot of the unfortunate stories out there. As Michael was leaving that day, he stopped by me and he said, "Connor, you like to talk a lot. I think you got to do voiceover." And I told my agent, and she said, "It's true. As you start to, as you start to become 10, 11 years old, you get kind of in that awkward stage, and it's hard to get you to get cast unless you're absolutely completely different, like some of these, young guys that are out there. It's going to be hard to get you cast. But you liked voiceover. You've done it a few times. You like it. I think we ought to start doing." And man, I found my tribe when the first session right after that, when I started to do that, I was like, this is all I want to do. I don't care about, going through mud to get to a location and, memorizing 50 pages of script notes and, getting angles and making sure you hit your mark. Voiceover, it was my people, my tribe. Voiceover community to this day is still one of the nicest, friendliest communities in the acting community. And it's just, they try to build each other up. And whereas on camera is very competitive. It's how can I beat you at the audition? But a voiceover, a lot of times they'll applaud. "I'm glad you got that audition, man. That's great." It's just it's a different dynamic.
Why do you think that is?
I think that, as voiceovers, especially, not as of late, because, as we talked about for this, I eh, early in Hollywood, voiceovers, we were called the hidden persuaders. We were not seen. We were there just to be heard. And you were not doing your job if someone goes, "Oh my God, was that you on the Visa commercial?" Because then you were standing out. And your goal is to storytell, to put the product or service before you as you're not a celebrity. You're not a voice. You're just there to explain stuff.
Hmm.
And so I've always kind of adhered to that. And I think voiceover, when they rely on everything else besides the physicality of the looks and that sort of thing, it just fosters naturalness of being a good human. And that's not to say that there's a lot of on camera that are wonderful. That is absolutely true. There are wonderful people for on camera, but as a general, it's very competitive, and sometimes behind the scenes it can be quite bitter.
Hmm.
Um, but I never really felt that way with voiceover. You're not competing against someone. It just might be that they don't want your particular voice for this spot, but that's
Hmm.
not to say that they may not hire you in a year for a different spot. Um, you know, so it's encouraging. It's the community is always it always seems to be evolving in a positive way, I think. And that's not to say there's not the drama queens and the negativity
Right.
in it, as just within even if we were a plumber. But by and large, it's just I think most of the community is absolutely wonderful. They want to help you get to your next stage of life. And that's important, man. I mean, when the world is against you in a way, or you feel that way, that helps to have people to say the world is not against you.
Yeah.
You need to take that next step, and then the next step, and then next thing you know, you've climbed that staircase.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that stick out about voice actors is all the laughs I hear. Especially when you're working on your craft. Uh, is that a true observation? It seems
It
like you
is
guys
true.
are always having a great time.
Yeah, because I mean, it's always fun to kind of show off the pipes, to say, it's like you're in a Dodge Ram and you want to, or Dodge Ram. What am I saying? If you're like you're in a Mustang and you want to kind of show off what you've got, and you might be on a Crest commercial where they've hired you for this particular role. So in the downtime, it's kind of fun to goof around and see what the other guys can do. She might be able to do a jingle or sing, and to crack each other up. It's kind of like in comedy, a stand-up comedian. It takes a lot to make a stand-up comedian laugh
Hmm.
because they do everything by rote. It's just like initially when they come up with their idea, they have a good sense of timing, and it makes them laugh. But after doing it millions of times, that's the trick, is to make it fresh and to sound like you're on stage and you just thought up of this one joke. That
Yeah.
for that audience to experience it with you is amazing. And same thing with I think voiceover. And we don't get to share it a lot with people because a lot of that stuff is edited out. I remember um, doing background voices for a lot of cartoons and commercials over the years, and it would be funny to have the actual recording session um, as opposed to what the finished product is, because getting there was half the fun. Finding out the silly voices that they would do, or they couldn't pronounce the word sofa or whatever the heck they were having trouble with.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
was That's what makes it fun. I keep a blooper reel myself. Ongoing through the years. Every time I make a mistake that makes me laugh, because it takes a lot to make me laugh, I will copy it and put it in that file. And on my days when I'm not doing so good, when I feel down, um, I think that's what's important about now, is that today is it's okay to admit that we're not perfect, that not every day you feel like smiling. Everybody goes through that situation where you're hard on yourself, or you get hard on other people, or we're human. And small little things that can pick you up, whether it's watching an old rerun of Carol Burnett, or puppy pictures on YouTube, or whatever it takes to get you through the next hour. It's okay to do that, to move through those, and to be gentler. It's so much a different world. I have a different way of talking with people now than I did. I was so smug when I was younger and just didn't care as much as I should, like I do now. Like now, my biggest fear is falling down. Maybe I'll never get back up again. It's like I think of the world in a different tone, and I think I wish that all people could just be a little more gentler with someone, because you have no idea what they've been through or are going to go through. Who
Yeah.
knows? We
And
don't know.
life's a hell of a thing. It throws a lot of potholes, and a
Yeah.
lot of people say it's full of tests. And so it's always a learning game. And I think perspective has a lot to do with that. You apprenticed on Disney and or for Disney and the NBC in your teens. What was it like being in that kind of creative environment? Did that help get your juices flowing?
Totally. Yeah. It's just like I remember, um, for the many projects over the years, going to record things at the Disney headquarters in Burbank at the studios, or even if they had to have us record in Orlando. Um, it's just amazing. It's just incredible the awe. It's I think it's to someone like someone almost not as great, obviously, but for someone to see the Grand Canyon for the first, you can't you if you see a picture of it, someone tells you about it, nothing beats being at the edge of the Grand. It has a sound. You can't explain that sound, but the Grand Canyon has a sound.
Hmm.
And same with Mount Rushmore or the Statue of Liberty. Yeah, they're just icons we've gotten used to seeing over the years. But when you see them in person for the very first time, even if you really don't share it with someone, I think there's just something amiss with you if your heart just doesn't go, "Oh my God,
I
that's
feel
what it."
like Yeah, I feel like when we're in those first time experiences, everything is makes us in awe. Everything from the flowers to the scenery to the rocks to,
Yes,
just because it's so new. And then being in a place like Disney and being able to be in these recording studios that you only see on TV,
right.
like you said, it's one thing to see it, it's another thing to be there. And also the greats that you're working with must have been
Oh my, yeah,
inspiring.
the legends, like just to be able to talk with them. As a child, I spent many years as a child on Sesame Street, so I got to know Jim Henson and Frank Oz fairly well. And even as a child, you had an ultimate feeling that Jim Henson would there was something special. It was like I can't explain it. It's like we're talking to someone you've never talked to before. You felt special if he looked at you and listened to you, and he would. And he had such a my mom called it a hippie vibe, but he had such a wonderful way about him that nothing ever was wrong. And I mean, he was pretty much the boss of the whole thing. And if something went wrong, he was like, "Well, I think we can do better than that. I think that the next time we're going to do that, it's going to be perfect." And we would just do it again. And when he passed away, I think it was 1990. I was doing my work in Los Angeles. Uh, they were, I think, in the middle of doing Sesame Street, so they had a lot of skits and stuff still that they probably need to ADR with his voice. And they had made a decision as to what they were going to do with Jim's characters. And so several of us were flown to New York um, that could do his voices. And ultimately, and what I applaud is the Henson organization went in the direction of finding someone within the puppeteer family that could in, involve the spirit of Kermit or whatever. And the voice may not be perfect, but that will come
Mm.
if you because there's so much to running those puppets. He didn't just do the voice; he did the whole puppeteering, and he
Yeah.
had a unique way of making the character walk or move, and something that I, as a voiceover, could not ever replicate. I'm not a puppeteer,
Hmm.
but we were called to do different recording sessions on the fly, at that immediate time. And I just remembered being, I wasn't that old at the time. I could have been 19 or 20, but at that time, and still is, Sesame Street was being shot at Astoria Street Studios in Queens, which it is now. It was a different location when I was growing up, but nonetheless, I arrived and I just was kind of embarrassed that I'm a man and I'm being asked to, go back and do this kid show. And I was kind of grumbling about that. And so I went in, talked to the receptionist, and she's like, "Yeah, go through the sound stage, take a left, and the recording room is there." Well, when I opened the door to the immense sound stage, and that sound stage, they break down the set after their season, and they put up a new set, whatever at that time, whatever it was, the Cosby Show or whatever else they were filming at that time. Um, but the Sesame Street set was up. When I walked in, it was motion detected lights. And so they would click on one by one. And off to my right was the actual set of Sesame Street. Now, that's the same set that has been used since 1969. That same walk up to that brownstone walk up has been the very same. Now, some of the rest of it they've probably replaced over the years, but that staircase is always, they've always been sure to include. And I don't know what it was about when I saw that it was a change in my life. I looked off to my right and I saw that iconic set and I fell to my knees. And it's just like, the weight of, it's the idea that you were being asked to do something for a wonderful organization like Children's Television Workshop Sesame Street. And you had the gall to, say, oh, I'm an adult. And, it's like, what am I saying? It's like Jim Henson was every much of a man. And the rest, Big Bird, Carol Spinney, Frank Nelson, everybody, they were all men. And they had dedicated their lives to doing those Muppets for Sesame Street. And so I just felt, immense gratification that I was or a blessing, profoundness that I was, providence that I was there. So I went into the recording studio and I spoke for 30 minutes about this, and everyone was in agreement that, it's the spirit of Jim Henson that is still there, whether he's there or not. And I believe, I still do promos for Sesame Street and stuff like that. And it's like his spirit is still there all these years later. And, that was 30 some odd years ago, unbelievable.
Absolutely. One of the things that you touched on a lot is the ripples in the water. The kind acts, the things that resonate with people. Everything from folks that you saw that had been impacted by Sesame Street and early works, and and how that resonates with the community. We were talking a little bit before we started, and I kind of wanted to touch on that because I thought that was a really truly touching story. Because the work that we put out there goes into the ether, and it's amazing when years later it comes back to give you those warm fuzzies and those that feeling that, wow, I didn't realize this was going to happen from this, but look at how it's changed the world or impacted at least this life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I shared the story with Jim Henson, and a lot of his words are still in my life today. His patience dealing with children and uptight producers, he was unflappable. He remained calm through it all. I don't know how, but that was just his spirit, just was very careful with other human beings. And his, at the end of every filming day, no matter what we were doing, he's like, well, have fun. If we were going to be continuing, and he was like, to him, that was the ultimate goal, was no matter what we're doing, the education will come, the understanding will come, but have fun with it. Because if you're not having fun with it, it's not, it won't be teleported across television or the cassettes or whatever. Many years ago, I met a very influential person in my life who immensely helped my career in voiceover. And his name was Dawes Butler. This is him. I have a picture of him here in my booth. He was like a grandfather. He was from Chicago, so everything, he kind of talked like this. He's a real short guy. He was the voice of Cap'n Crunch, Yogi Bear, Snagglepuss, Elroy Jetson, basically every Hanna-Barbera character known to man. And he was such a, oh my God, he was like a million Jim Hensons in one. And him and his wife lived quietly right on the edge of Beverly Hills, but they had just a normal house with normal kids, and they went to church twice a week. And here was a guy, he was iconic, the voice of Yogi Bear. Today it doesn't sound as profound, but back then you have to remember when I met him in the 80s, he had already been a huge star. His voice had been a star for over 30 years. He'd done a lot of work with Stan Freberg. He was on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, just on and on and on. But no ego, absolutely no ego. That he didn't flaunt any. He didn't wear no jewelry. He just was the most down to earth person I think I've ever met in my life. But it was his quiet way about him. He never got excited about anything unless it was in the script or whatever. But he used to get on to me when we were, for one, I couldn't afford his classes. I was working at Radio Shack, and he'd come in for, he was building a shortwave or something, and I helped him out with something. And when he left, the kid next to me said, "Hey, that's Yogi Bear. That's the voice of Yogi Bear." I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, that's the voice." So, I probably would get in trouble now for saying this, but Radio Shack, we could look up people's addresses. Well, I did. Well, I drove by his house one Friday and knocked on the door, and I told him what I'd done, and he wasn't upset. And I said, "That's what I wanted. I want to do voiceover. I'm an actor, and I want to do this." And I said, "I want to do voices." And he's like, "Well, yeah, that's the first thing you got to get out of your head right there. They're not voices. They're characters. They're real characters. You got to learn how to do characters, boy." And today, you talk about ripples in a pond. I find myself, I have my own students that are wanting to get into voiceover, or maybe their voiceover is they're wanting to up their game and become more, get more clients, etc. So I find myself in coaching. A lot of Dawes's words will sneak in, or what I call Dawesisms will pop into my vernacular. And when the student may not recognize, but I'll say something that's very archaic, and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, let me explain it this, you're in your modern terms." But yeah, so the rippling effect, that niceness never went away, and it changed me as a kid, because I was I was like hell on wheels, basically. It's just like, I don't care about the journey. I want to get there. That is where I want to do voices. I want to live in Beverly Hills. I want. Dawes had all of that and much more, but he was very quickly to talk about the riches of life no matter what you do, whether you sell beans, whether you're a bean counter, having a happy, productive life isn't about, like he said, unless you're really egotistical, it's probably not going to be on your headstone that you were the voice of Yogi Bear. And I don't think it is on his, although Mel Blancs does say, "That's all, folks," oddly enough, which is true. But Dawes was that early, just, he didn't say it in so many words, but he would subscribe to that. Whoever said that the meaning of life is on the headstone, it's the dash. Here's the born date, here's the death date. Life is what happens in that dash, and it's just a dash. But on the headstone, it's just a damn dash. All that seems as important is when you were born and when you died, and maybe you're a mom or you're a dad. Yeah. That's it.
Life becomes so simple as you get older, especially right before you die. It's a combination of all these years where you thought you knew what was important, and then, you're laid bare, and the realities of what's important really come up. And typically I find it's family, it's friends, it's the love that you created and those ripples that you made along that route that affected others' lives. And
100%, yeah.
We can have kids as long as we want. I don't have any. I'm not able to. But my legacy is sending these ripples out. They'll be here long after I'm gone. And if I was able to shake some nuggets of wisdom out of the trees of the guests to help teach others, that to me is really important.
It is.
For me, I always grew up, I was like, gosh, how do they do this? How do I get into that? Or how do I do this? And this has become kind of a platform to explore different guests' journeys and gain some tidbits of insight that might inspire them to the hows behind different career paths. And
I think it's wonderful. I don't remember anything remotely like this when I was a kid. I mean, it was to get into Hollywood. That was a great mystery. I mean, I was in Hollywood, and still, how do you go to the next level? That was like a secret society.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're talking about, it's important for someone like yourself and myself to create those ripples, because, I don't have children either to continue on the Connerisms down the road. For me, my story is that when I was probably about 10 or 11, and I think we were doing a Star Wars commercial for Kenner. And that particular day, the director called me over, and after we were done, and he said, "Hey, I think you like guys." And I'm like, "No, I don't like guys. I like girls." And I'm 10 years old. And he's like, "No, I think you like guys." And he just kept badgering me about that. And I broke out in a sweat inside because I knew it was true. But at 10, what do you know? I mean, you really don't know a whole heck of a lot. And I was confused about everything, but all of a sudden I felt like someone was on to me. Was there a tell? Was there something that I did? I was playing on screen with another kid. We were playing with action figures, not Barbie dolls. And again, I'm saying this not to be evil or bad, but that's the thought process in the 70s. For one, being gay or bisexual or anything that was different than straight was weird and not allowed. It shook me so much. I went to my agent. I told her that night. I said, "This is what the guy said," and she had known all along. I don't know, the mother's I don't know what the heck it was. She had already known that I was probably gay. Um, and she says, and it sounds, what I'm about to say is, it's going to sound cold. But what she said to me is, she asked me, do you like doing commercials and the film and the television and da da da? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, if you like doing all of that, you're going to have to not let that be seen, whatever that was. You're going to have to hide it because they won't hire you if they find out you are. She had been an agent for Paul Lynde and several other people. And even then, Paul Lynde, where everybody pretty much knew, he was just a confirmed bachelor. He never talked about it, wasn't allowed to talk about it. He joked about it like you and I were talking about, to keep from being bullied as a child. It was easier if you can beat them to ground zero and make fun of myself before they can, I win. Because now I scored points with them and I've already cleared the dust, so they can't attack me now. I've attacked myself more than they can do any harm, or at least that's the perception. So that's how Paul Lynde worked, is, he just made fun of himself and, basically had this, veneer of, I don't care, when he actually did. But I think that day is like, at 10 years old, that's when I became a man. It's like the world all of a sudden shifted at that point. It's like I realized life isn't easy, because now every day when I walk out that door, I better be straight. I need to, what I thought was being straight, I had to learn everything there was about football. What do they straight guys talk? My dad, what do they talk about? Football, women, cars, everything that I didn't.
Right.
And that was, oh my God, it was like I should have got an Academy Award for that stuff, because the real big acting job for the rest of my life had been putting on that, what I thought was a straight role. And Hollywood was so different back then, but it's still kind of that way. I mean, now it's kind of gone overboard. Now it's like every show we need to have some 3 people from the LGBTQ plus community. And I love that they're involving, but it's like now they're going overboard, and I'm afraid they're making people sick of it the other way. It's just
Isn't
one
that
or
the
the
way?
other.
Isn't that the way it always goes? Though it's
Yeah,
the pendulum swings so far, and then it has to swing back almost as far until you
I think
find
so,
that
before it comes
middle.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very glad of the inclusivity now and stuff. It's kind of an awkward ground for all of us, whether you're straight or LGBTQ plus, whatever you are. The whole world has shifted. This whole thing we're in now with AI and with COVID, all this stuff that has been going in our life is making it everything. We're having to learn real basic rules again. Now I just found out the other day, we're not allowed to call someone ma'am. That will upset somebody. It's like, that was the way I was raised. So that apparently that's now wrong. So it's a whole different learning process. And so that had a huge profound effect on me. And when I, as I got older enough to develop relationships with people, um because it was like holding on to something, I didn't know if I would ever get this again. It seemed like a lot of my buddies that were straight were just going through the alphabet of dating,
Mhm.
and I was afraid to do that. I wanted to get to Z. I wanted to get to that person and hang on, because yeah, I didn't really have like a sense of family growing up, and it's like I wanted that desperately, to have that sense of security, because
Permanency, right?
permanence. Thank you. Yes, because I can't even put it into words, because I didn't experience that as a child. But my God, I played every commercial, every show we were on. I played that. There were so many times in commercials I would cry, because I remember doing a damn Kleenex commercial, and we were celebrating Thanksgiving, and it was so easy for me to play, because I didn't want them to leave. My dad, my mom, my sister was there, my friend, my grandma.
Hmm.
That was a Norman Rockwell. I'll never experience that type of Thanksgiving ever again. But I did, in 1980, I did experience it. And I cried so hard. Nobody could understand what the hell's wrong with you. It's like, well, I couldn't explain it, because I didn't want it to end. I wanted that moment. I wanted that living room, that kitchen, and it was all fake, because it didn't have that permanency. So I wanted to get to that. If I was going to have a partner, um, I don't want a boyfriend. I don't want a one night stand. I want someone that I can hang my head on, and that they can hang their head on me, someone that will be with you thick or thin.
Have you
And
found that person?
yeah, yeah, I am. I'm lucky enough to have that person in my life, to where, thank God he has no interest in acting at all. He could care less what I do, and I could care less what he does. So we make the perfect companions, that we uh I think just probably like what you do. You're kind of nervous about someone who has interest in you as a person, whether it's a friend or whatever. What if they are just interested in what you're doing as a career, whether you're a DJ and you're at an event, you're popular, you're great with the quips and the microphone. And um, as you probably understand, so many of us that are in media, we might be great and perform on stage in front of the lights, in front of the microphone, but at a party, I'm not so much of a great party person, because unless I have a script, or I am the main attraction, I have a real issue. And that's years of counseling to realize, if I'm not the main attraction, then I don't want to be any part of it. And that's stupid. That's horrible.
Yeah, but you know what?
Why not?
I share that with you.
Do
It's so
you?
easy. Yeah, well, being a DJ and the MC, you carry that spotlight. Everybody looks to you for direction.
Right.
You're also creating that environment and that atmosphere. Um, but they don't know who you are truly.
No.
If people were to follow me around and watch me go to like a huge club, and I'm not part of the MCing. I'm the shy guy kind of on the side. I hope I have a
Yeah.
bunch of friends. If I don't, probably going to stay close to the wall, hold it up.
Right. Exactly. And look at, well, I think I need to go make a kick about now, or whatever that.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
the same way. One of my best friends, who I lost during COVID, uh, he and his family are, I lived vicariously through him. He had a wonderful, or has a wonderful family, and he died young with COVID. But he was here in Oklahoma City. He was a huge DJ. Uh, he was on the radio as well, and he'd do weddings, and he was the party starter. It's like, if he put on Instagram, "Hey, I'm going to be," people in droves would come out to to see DJ Sod. And
Hmm.
uh, we were such best friends when we would travel to events. I remember we were going to a convention down in Houston, and he was going to do the sound and mixing and stuff. And during this corporate event, they'd have in the evening they'd have a time for dancing and stuff. So he would be the DJ then, but during the day he would be making sure all the audio visual stuff is working. So people were saying, "What did you guys talk about on the way down?" And it's like, our relationship is quiet time together. So you would think that all he would listen to would be club music because that's all he played, but he didn't. It was it was the strangest, quietest music, classical, and I would play. I have a very eclectic taste, so he listened to some of my crap. I grew up with country music, which he, basically hated because how many beats per minute are we getting on this thing?
Right.
And I would mention songs like Hall and Oates. Well, he had never heard of the song because it's not a dance song. It's not something he can mix. Um, he knew dance numbers. Now, if you talked about YMCA or the latest Lady Gaga, he knew it. He would tell you how many beats per minute before he would even know. He wouldn't even know the words to the song. But that's what I'm saying. On the other end of it, a lot of people didn't. I think they thought they knew him. They thought they knew me, but it's like I'm like you and he was like you. Is that we were the quiet ones, unless he was hired to bring the party. It's like that. It's all or nothing.
It's stepping into a role, almost like acting in a way, I think, or even maybe like a character, so you can learn to be like that, but it's hard to incorporate that to your core, especially because I think everybody has their own core. Some people are like
Oh yeah.
hard shell on the outside, nice and gooey on the inside. I tend to
We
be
don't want
one of those.
anyone to get in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope you're having a good time. I've been enjoying this so far. I have a few other questions that I want to kind of relate to career to offer insight. We talked about these tools, these metaphorical tools that you've picked up, not only from meeting the right people who have instilled some good nuggets of wisdom in you as you have been going through your journey, but also just learning from the experience in itself. So if we talk about range for a second and creating a voice for a new character or a commercial, what's your process for that? Can you give a little bit of insight?
Yeah. So most voiceovers, the way you hear them is the way they are on everything. That's just what they do. If either you want it or you do not. For those of us that do animation or have learned to have a range, it's a different process. I've always been a voiceover nerd from even back in my on-camera days. I was so obsessed. When we went to Disneyland, it wasn't enough just to enjoy Disney. I needed to know, who is the voice of Disneyland that I'm hearing? What is his name? What does he look like? Who's the guy that's in the Haunted Mansion? And didn't I also hear him on the Mr. Goodwrench commercial? I think that's the same guy. And as I got older, putting Jim Henson, oh my God. So I thought Ernie was a real guy. I was an idiot. I thought Ernie and Cookie Monster were, and then to realize, wait a minute, he does Ernie and he also does Kermit the Frog and Guy Smile. What? Mm-hmm. That was just incredible to me. So, I had back in those days we had Walkman, so all of my friends were recording the latest Michael Jackson, the latest Air Supply, so whatever the heck was going on. I was waiting for the damn songs to end so I could record the commercials that were playing on. So, in storage, I have thousands of cassettes of nothing but commercials from 1981 to, up till the 90s, where I would record just the commercials because I wanted to know, apparently they are good enough to be hired. So if I imitate that, I can do that. And I kind of let that go for a while. And I worked on becoming a core actor. And it was in an audition in Hollywood where I had met another voiceover, still very active. His name is Andre Stoika. And back in those days, we had, you had to have the voice of God. You needed to sound like Orson Welles or Gary Owens, or, you had to have the latest FM voice. You had to sound this way. You had to have that thing. And so, everybody was talking, should I start smoking? Should I have whiskey? What type of whiskey will make me have a deep voice? Mm-hmm. All these different techniques that I was working on. And then I met Andre Stoika at this commercial audition, a cattle call. And he had the strangest, he sounded like if a lawn gnome had a voice, it would be kind of like him. I just thought to myself, how sad that this guy, this older man is here at this commercial. He's not going to get it. How sad. You need to really work on the voice. You need to be, have a deep voice. Not only did he win that commercial, but I just remember weeks later, I was watching the Tonight Show, and there was 3 network commercials back to back that all had Andre Stoica as the voice. And I was like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no longer, they don't want that Orson Welles voice. The announcer, back then they used the term slice of life. We want a slice of life guy. And Andre Stoica was Price Pfister Faucets, the faucet with a funny name. Domino's Pizza, we deliver. He had a real strange way of talking, and he talked like this. And I just thought, who the hell talks like that? I mean, is that put on? Is that? No, I mean, that's the way he's really, Jesus, oh my God, he'll never get hired. He's still working to this day. So I remember seeing him months later at another cattle call. And this is a fascinating guy. For one, he's successful. And how did he get this way? So I started talking to him, and I asked him what his greatest fear was. And he said, my greatest fear is maybe one day waking up and my voice no longer being in demand. And that put the fear of God in me. I'm like, oh my God. So the answer to that is if I can do a multitude of voices, they'll never get tired of, if they get tired of one voice, I'll switch to another, and then another, and then another. And plus all these great voiceovers were dying, Orson Welles and Paul Frees and Dawes Butler. And, in a way, it's, especially after they passed away, unfortunately, seemed like I could do their voice. It just came to me. And I became what they called a utilitarian voiceover. So if I was like a Swiss Army knife of voiceovers, if they needed this, or this, that's what I would do. I don't really remember a commercial where they've ever hired me for this voice. Oftentimes when I answer this phone in the studio, I say studio, people say, hey, can I speak with Connor Quinn? Yeah, hold on, let me get him. And then I come back with a professional voice, because when they hear this, they don't think, this is just the accountant or some idiot,
Right.
what,
Right.
When you usually hear guys with great voices, you're like, oh my gosh, he must be in radio, a DJ, or a voiceover. But,
it's funny. When I first started my podcast, I brought my DJ persona with me. And so I was like, hey, how you doing? Welcome to, and I had to learn, my own style.
Because you were taught to do the announcing, just like I was taught to, Paul Frees, talk to me how to address a microphone. You need to address the microphone because this is a woman that you're making love to. And, she will love the iambic pentameter of your mellifluous voice, and I had to unlearn that, but yet I still have to use that because occasionally, just yesterday, they asked me to do a Don Pardo. My students, I tell them, that they're putting, especially guys that have come from radio, I have to have them unlearn that everything they were taught in radio. I think people in radio are some of the hardest to get into voiceover because they have that gag reflex where they want to they see a microphone and they think perform. And, so we practice a lot of times without even the microphone there and get used to, how do you talk in a coffee shop, for God's sakes? Right. Do you talk to your friends like with that damn voice?
Right.
Well, no. Well, that's the way I want you to talk to me. And they always say, but your demos don't, I came from a different time, and that is my wheelhouse, is doing other people's voices. That's just where I've kind of fit in. But very rarely am I hired to do my own voice. They always want, can you do your Phil Hartman? Can you do Casey Kasem? Can you? And occasionally
can you do me a favor?
What's that?
I want to hear your Phil Hartman. He's one of my favorites.
Phil was kind of an interesting, we were pretty good friends when he was alive, and he was one of those, we were talking about this earlier, he was a celebrity that when I first met him, he was not really a celebrity at all. It was just, he did a lot of Activision commercials and maybe Depend undergarments. You never, He was just a spokesman. And it wasn't until he was at the Groundlings in LA, and then he got picked up by Saturday Night Live, and he blew up, and again, he was a utilitarian actor there because Dana Carvey was really the star. But when you compared the impersonations, Phil's was more accurate, but Dana was funny. It was a caricature. Right. Mm. But Phil, when he would do George Bush, it was a little more accurate. Or when he would do Ed McMahon or Frank Sinatra. So he had to kind of learn to, instead of drawing a Rembrandt, draw a caricature. Mm. Because funny is where the money is, basically. Yeah. And so he and I were having to do these like seminar type things across the country for people who wanting to get into acting, and he would talk about how to be an announcer or a spokesman, and I would talk about character building, which is, I haven't even gotten back to that thing questions you asked. But Phil was, the more I was around him, the more his voice, because he kind of talked that way all the time. What became funny just became his pretty much normal voice around people. Now, if you were with him privately, he didn't talk this way. He didn't act that way. It was like my friend Sod. It was the crap was off, and you saw him who he really was. But any other time, it was what he thought that people had expected. So he would give you Phil Hartman. That's sassy. I'm Troy McClure. Perhaps you recognize me from my many films. Here comes the Coast Guard and red paint. Yummy, but deadly. That type of thing he would do. And, he was another one. I would imitate him in front of him, and he would laugh, and just say, I don't sound like that. I'm like, yeah, you do sound like that. And when he was murdered, it's like, I don't know, when someone passes, it seems like if I have a vested interest in their voice, like Casey Kasem, I never did him while he was alive, ever. I would jokingly do it in auditions. I'd say, well, if Casey Kasem was selling this ketchup, this is what he would sound like. And then I would do it privately. But it wasn't until they passed away that it's like I felt like permission to do their voice,
Homage.
Exactly. And, when we're talking about building a character, so I would listen to these cassettes all day long of these voices that I was in love with. And Joni, being my agent, one of her side jobs for me was calling around to all the talent agents in Los Angeles and getting their house reels of voiceovers. And they would send them to her office thinking that these were going to be cast. She was an agent, for God's sake. She wasn't going to cast anything. Well, she would give me those reels. I still have them. And I have thousands of them. And everyone from Mel Blanc, who didn't need a demo, but he had one. June Foray, Paul Frees. I've got an old cassette. This is a guy named Alan Blevis. Look at you can tell that it's dated. He was one of the biggest political, he was the voice of Budget Rent-A-Car, or Enterprise. Enterprise will pick you up. That's all I say. But I would study these, like people would buy the latest Thriller album or whatever. I would be listening to these demos, trying to get these voices down. And one particular voice I absolutely just fell in love with, and it came naturally to me, was a guy that Joni was also his agent for a while. It was Ed Grover. He was a character actor. He was on Rockford Files, Quincy. He did all those type of things. But voiceover, he was as big as you get. He was the voice of Macintosh, the voice of Nissan, the voice of Visa, the voice of, it was just $1 million accounts all the way around. He and Don LaFontaine, Mel Blanc, they were in that few small 5% category at the top of the game, right? Well, I loved doing his voice, and Joni was fairly young at the time as an agent. Well, she had to have a lot of clients coming to her wanting the Ed Grover voice. Well, they couldn't afford him. He's the voice of Macintosh. How could Jerry's Plumbing and Heating afford such a thing? But then she got an idea. I could do the voice. Well, there was no internet back then. They couldn't Google Ed Grover. Nobody pretty much outside of advertising knew what he looked like. Much less these poor clients. So the gig is that I would go and I'd have to talk, I'm 16 years old, but I'd have to talk like a 45-year-old man the whole time and sign in with his name, do the commercial. When the money came in, it was such a small little amount. She'd go, oh, well, that's Connor. That wasn't really it. So I would get my, at that time, I think I got 90%. She would take 10%. Well, this went on and on and on. And finally, one night, this is a story for another time right here. At 16, I had my own apartment, which should have never happened right there. And so we can talk about that some other time. But anyway, I had my own apartment. And that night, the phone, we had landlines back then. The landline rang and it was Ed Grover's voice. And he said, Connor Quinn. And I said, oh my God, Ed Grover. And he said, yes. And he said, I would like to take you out to dinner. And I mean, it may as well have been a Cary Grant to me. In fact, now I'm talking like Cary Grant. He said, have you ever eaten at the Beverly Hilton? And I said, no. And he says, well, you're going to tonight, 7:00. Is that good for you? Perfect. That'll work. I'll send my car for you. A car? I've never ate at the Beverly Hilton. I've never been in a limo. I mean, this is like a dream.
Right.
Well, there had been rumors that the guy was a mafia, but all that out the window. Who cares? It's Ed Grover. Car shows up. I go out. We go to the Beverly Hilton. It was like a movie. He had a guy that was behind him, putting him in his chair, and doing his napkin, and it was a big show. We ate our little salads, and we're just politely talking and that sort of thing. And finally, it came around. He goes, what's interesting, Connor, is I was driving around Southern California today as if we were somewhere else. And you know what I heard on the radio? And I said, what? And he said, I heard my voice for the Southern California Toyota Dealers Association. And my ass, I was like, oh my God, because I knew I had done that voice. And I was so stupid. I was like, does he really? Well, that's amazing. He thinks that was him. I've got him fooled. And he said, so do you see a problem with that, Connor? And I said, no, it's Toyota. That's great. And he goes, no, you see, I'm the voice of Nissan. And you see, my wife, she loves the furs and she loves the diamonds and she loves the money. And if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, is what he told me. And I said, what? And he's like, yeah, because if you see, Nissan doesn't like Toyota. And if they heard me doing Toyota, I would lose this multi-million-dollar account right away. And then Mrs. Grover would be very unhappy. And Mr. Grover would live in a hut on the beach. And all of this was going over my head. I'm just a teenager. I was like, I don't know what the hell is he talking about? But I was like, I think he's on to me. I think if I can transcribe this. And he said, would you know anything about this girl? I was so scared. I thought, okay, he's going to kill me. So, something's going to happen. All this dressage, it's all going to end. So I threw Joni under the bus. I said, we've been doing your voice for I don't know how long. And anytime she wants someone, that's cheap and your voice, I go and do it. And yesterday I was in Santa Monica and I did your voice. And it was for a wiper blade commercial. Okay. I said everything. So I spewed diarrhea for like an hour. And he sat there listening. He sat back in his chair and listened. And at the end of it, he said, well, I think that imitation is the highest form of flattery. And he said, you do my voice well. I applaud you on that. And then he said, Connor, do you believe in Jesus? And I said, yeah. In fact, I do. And he said, well, and you have a phone. I know because I called you on it. So if Jesus Christ calls you tomorrow night and says, I want you to do a commercial for a wiper blade company, you're going to hang up on said Jesus and you're going to call me, Ed Grover, and you're going to ask if I can do it. And I will tell you yes or no. And then you will call and say, yes, I will do it, or I won't do it. Does that make sense to you? I was like, it put the fear of God in me. I was like, yes, sir. Yes, absolutely. And then we went right back to eating and everything was back to normal. In retrospect, as an adult, he was an actor and he was directing a scene and he played me hard. Scared the hell out of me. He knew what time it was. So he said, before we ended, he says, whatever comes to you, let me have the big potatoes and I'll leave all the small potatoes for you. Is that a deal? And I said, that's a deal. And a few weeks later, he invited me over. His wife made this Italian dinner. It was absolutely marvelous. He was one of the few actors at that time had a home studio. He was teaching me how to address a microphone and all that. And about 10 years later, he was going to retire from Visa, just retire from voice acting in general. And he told Visa, there's a kid that does my voice that's a hell of a lot cheaper than me. And someone in Des Moines, Iowa could care less if Ed Grover's doing the commercial or not. And if I were you, I'd hire him. So he handed me my career on a silver platter because Visa called. And for another 7 years, I did Visa. So, it was like there's a little place just outside Tupelo, Mississippi that serves up the best baby back ribs. But if you go to Ray's, be sure to bring your Visa card because he doesn't take American Express. Visa, it's everywhere you want to be. And that was just how he delivered almost all of his, no matter what he was doing, Nissan, Windy, whatever that he was doing. It was that same way of talking every way. It was kind of this gentle way of talking to you. It was an announcer and very formal, but yet it sounded like a crazy uncle that might persuade you to buy a car or whatever. And I still, even this last week, I was using his voice. So I still use it to this day. So a long-winded answer to your thing is I would listen day and night. I would fall asleep listening to Casey Kasem. And I would just highlight, back then we'd splice the reels. I would splice it to his, I didn't care about the damn music. What's her name in the Miami Sound Machine? That goes to the ZZ Top in the trash. I wanted just an hour, 2 hours of Casey Kasem and just put it on a loop. And I would study that voice and, all of his, how he would take off and then how he would end. And, the first thing I would get is the rhythm. That's the first thing I try to visualize is the rhythm of how they speak. And, like Paul Frees is the rhythm of Southern California. KJ, what did he do? KOFM, whatever the thing. He always had this intensity. Mm-hmm. So if he was in the Haunted Mansion, it was like, I am your ghost host. And no flash pictures, please. So he had this way of talking. So once you get that, and Dana Carvey works the same way. When
those inflections or
when he's trying to do, he always talks about if you want to do George Bush, he would do Mr. Rogers and John Wayne and mix them, and then all of a sudden you get George Bush.
Right. So and you got to clench your butt a little. Got to get it up in there. Yeah. Read. I remember
Phil Hartman used to say, "If you want to talk like Michael Caine, you must speak in short sentences."
Right.
Right. Yeah. So
I've been having a blast. Let me circle this around to another endeavor that you're involved with, which is mentalism. And I love the fact that you're into mentalism. You offered to perhaps give an example of this with us today on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'll send you just a direct link. What this is this will click on this link and it'll take you to Google Images. It's a direct link. So you can go to Google Images and just go to Google Images.
Is this something that I can include in the podcast description if our guests want to do this same exercise, or would it not work?
No, just for you. Yeah. It's just going to be on your mind only. So go to that link and let me know when you're there.
Let's see. I missed where you sent it to.
It's in the chat here in the Zoom.
Oh, okay. Give me 1 second.
If you need me to resend that.
All right.
At the very bottom of your screen, it'll say chat. Did you find it?
I did. It's just loading for a second.
Okay. It should take you to Google Images, and you should have it. Just let me know when you're there, and it'll have the the search bar.
Yep. So I at the search bar.
Okay. So you're not wearing glasses. I can't see your screen or anything like that. I want you to think of something specific. I want you to think of the Statue of Liberty, a rutabaga, an orange cube, something specific. And I want you to type it in that search engine, and it'll come up with a bunch of images. And I want you just to pick one out and study that, and just think for a second of whatever object it was, and let me know when you've done that.
Okay.
Have you done that? Okay. So, and you can close that. We're not going to use that anymore. So to help generate some, because if I ask you to think of something, people think of a house or a tree or a car. It's the same. So going through Google Images is great because it's having you actually pull anything. You can pull anything in the world, and it'll try to help you. It's like AI. It'll bring something to you, and hopefully, whatever you entered will. So did you get some kind of an image that you picked on?
I did. Oh, well.
Okay. Don't go back to it.
Okay.
Just in general, you've got it showed you several versions of whatever you typed, I would imagine.
Correct.
Right. So let's concentrate on the words that you used to describe it. Was it more than one word?
Yes.
Okay. Concentrate on the number of words here. Do
you want me to tell you the number?
No. Just count slowly from 1 to 6.
Okay.
Just say it real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So I'm thinking there's 4. No, there's 3 words. Yeah, there's 3 words, right?
Yes.
In what you were thinking of. Let's just start with the first word. Let's just go with that. Don't move your mouth, but count in your mind how many letters are in that. And just keep saying the number 7 over and over and over and over in your mind. Is it the number 7? No, it's the number 6.
It is.
It is 6. Yeah. If we were in a sandbox and there's just these children's blocks of letters of everything in that word, and they were all scattered in front of you, just mix up all the letters, mix, reach down and pick up that letter and look at it. Is that the letter R?
No.
It looks like it. There is an R in it, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. I don't even know why this is made, because I'm getting country with this. I mean, like out in the country or rural with this. Does that make sense or no?
Nope.
It is country because I'm getting a country. This is a song.
Oh.
And it was a country artist it was Sheb Woolley. Was it Purple People Eater?
Yes, it was. That's amazing.
So a virtual high five.
Yep. You just blew my mind, sir. I thought that was going to be for sure one that would be difficult. That's amazing.
That was a good one. Yeah, most people pick something very bland. That was a good word.
The image that I picked was even better. It was some cartoon character eating a person. So,
yeah, perfect. It's like, what a great song. I mean, if you when you're really bored, look up Sheb Woolley. He's from Oklahoma, of all places. Same town as Roger Miller.
Amazing. A couple last questions, and
yeah, go ahead.
I will be inviting you back if you are interested.
Oh yeah, I've never done this before.
Oh, well, you're a natural. It's one of those gifts that lends from the other stuff, I think.
Right. It's like a friend of mine, she told me about this matchmaker, and what the hell would anyone want to talk? And she's like, no, I think that they would be interested in your story. I'm like, why? I just don't see that. And so I put it up there just I had a few, I think, spam type of things that I ignored and stuff. But yours came in and you were so complimentary about my profile or whatever. And I was like, I had to respond. And so it's just bizarre that this worked out.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy and honored that you said yes.
Oh yeah.
The thing that I love about my show is, our listeners can listen in and they glean all of these insights, not only wonderful, amazing stories from people that they respect or at least know, from the big screen, if you will, or other examples of their work, but being able to actually connect with them and get to know someone beyond just, what you see on a prime time TV show for a quick interview or something like
Right.
that, and you get to gain some insights also with examples with you, or how you got into the field, how that blossomed for you, the tools that you picked up along the way. People, especially in a younger age bracket, are looking for those answers, looking to figure out how do we become what we want to be. These are
Yeah, it
great
saddens me because
examples.
they all think they know the answer by becoming influencers. And if you get TikTok or you create a YouTube channel, you're immediately going to have 100,000 subscribers, and YouTube will pay you for doing nothing at all, and life is grand.
Hmm.
It's like, and I've never seen this before, where everybody, these younger generations, they just have this sense of entitlement that uh, I I'm an entertainer and I have something to give. They're already acting like a celebrity when they've done nothing to earn a celebrity.
Right.
They made a video of their mom falling down, or they went into Walmart and took a crap on the floor, or do something stupid, and that garnered enough people going, "Oh my God, what is this?" To I think that the quieter, the more intelligent ones, they need to find a true way of uh who cares if you become an influencer or a celebrity or whatever, but what's more important is your life,
Yeah.
because you know as you and I know, and I definitely know as I have gotten older, that it's great, all the stuff that I have that's happened to me is wonderful. If I died tonight, I've lived a great life, but it's everything else around you besides the business and the money and the checks coming in, and that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Well, it's how we touch. A couple things come to my mind. One is that saying, "The one with the most toys wins." Whoever came
Yeah,
up with that was a very shallow, unhappy person. It's about the ripples in the water, and
it
it's
is.
about the love that we spread around us. And this idea that I've been exploring with my podcast recently, with some of the mental health stuff that I've been focused on with some of the experts that I'm working with, is we're kind of at a precipice. We're like an apex civilization currently, and we're either going to evolve or we're going to crumble, which has historically been the example, over history. And we're now in this age of globalization, AI, a lot of these other tools that have really brought us together on a global aspect. And it's interesting and hopeful, and as we continue to have discourse amongst ourselves, whether that's on like a video game, which you've done some voiceovers for, I forgot to mention.
Right,
But these video game players are playing with people that are on the other side of the world and forming
right.
friendships that they never would have been able to otherwise, with this commonality of a video game that they both enjoy. And what develops out of that is, you get to know about their family, you get to know about them, and you start realizing we're all people. It's not so much the populations that are horrible as much as it is the leadership. And that's
Yeah,
where, as a collective, awareness is a big thing. But then the other part of that is, we need to foster like a spirit of cooperation versus dominance. And if we can get to that
that
place,
is true.
then hopefully, we can evolve as a people.
In my career, that's what really, Joni helped with that understanding of you start becoming more successful and competitive as an actor when you quit focusing on the other people. I was focusing on my what I believed was my competition,
Mm.
and I was doing that when I should have been doing the internal work as an actor to better my craft. I was more I was coming up with these wily coyote solutions. You know, I remember, back in the day doing cattle calls for on camera commercials. I had, for most of the time in the 70s, a big campaign I'd done as a kid was for what was called McDonald Land commercials. So we were on there we did hundreds of commercials with Ronald McDonald and Grimace, and we had all these characters. And I think that's why I'm a big guy now is we weren't allowed to eat back then. I didn't have my first milkshake till I was probably about 15, 14, 15, because as a child, they kept us so thin so we could be competitive. That was the ideal of the 70s. You
Mm.
wouldn't be cast if you were, quote, normal. You had to, the camera puts weight on you, so you have to look thin. And, I think as I got older and more comfortable in voiceover, there was no longer that parental person telling me now I can eat whatever the heck I want. And I think that then I went like you said, the pendulum swings, and I did. I really enjoyed food. Um, it's still a battle. It's like,
But you're
but I
making
was
your
thin
way
my
back to
whole,
the midway, right? It's that pendulum
yeah,
swings
exactly. Losing weight and
extreme, and
trying to
then
take care of myself.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
But I didn't put on weight till I was probably 26, 27 years old. I was thin my whole life until then. And so I was coming off these every commercial I did, we ate some crap, which it wasn't real food. We'd eat it, and then as soon as the camera was off, we'd spit it out. It looked good on camera. The rules have changed about how they can, you know, uh, use the food in commercials today. But anyway, so at these auditions, I was trying to go for something other than food. I was trying to go for something interesting. I was trying to do TV shows, which was very hard. And this other kid, he told me, he's like, you know how I get auditions? You know how I win them? And I'm like, how? And back in those days, we took a gym bag to every damn, we had all of our clothes and makeup, everything in them. And he's like, get a tape recorder, put in your gym bag, hit record, go in, do your audition. You've got the gym bag laying on the floor. You do your audition, and then you leave. And you let them do about 3 or 4 people. Then you pop back and you go, oh my God, can I get my gym? Thank you. Get the gym bag, go to your car and listen to what they said about your audition. And that is how you're going to improve. This was brilliant. This
Absolutely.
was a Wile E. Coyote shortcut. So I did. I got a tape recorder. I put it in the gym bag. I did my sides. I read in front of them. I left, came back about 4 people later, got it, went to the car. And the guy talked how he hated blondes. And the woman said, oh, his cologne, he smells like a French whore. And so I thought, well, okay, the next commercial will get better. It was worse the second one. Just horrible things. And my agent, Joni, found out that I had been doing it. And she's like, what are you doing? Those conversations aren't meant for you. They're not trying to hurt you. They're finding ways of not getting you. They're looking for the person. And so that's their way of just dismissing you. You don't take it personally. You are not supposed to hear any of those conversations. So it's unfair for you to judge them and this is not going to get you ahead. Thank God
Mm-hmm.
she jumped in early and put a stop to that, because I thought I'd found this is the solution. I thought that's what this kid did. I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't work.
And to me, as I heard that, I was like, wow, that's a great idea. But I can understand the other side too.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, I found myself so depressed, and I had enough things already to be depressed about. This was just adding to it. So she was like, you know, of course, unless you get the job, they're not going to say anything positive. Even if you get the job, they're going to say, if he was just a little bit taller,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
maybe just a little bit fatter, a little bit thinner, there's always something wrong. That's the nature of the business. Is as an actor, you are at the whims of other people, whether you have a career or not, and you try everything your best to prepare for it. But ultimately, if you're not in the right place at the right time, and if it's not luck, you probably are not going to make it.
Yeah.
It's every year someone comes out with a Screen Actors Guild, and I don't know the actual number, but it's horrible. It'll say, like, for example, less than 8% of the Screen Actors Guild members make over $25,000 a year. That's the reality.
Right.
So everyone's thinking, I'm going to go to Hollywood and become an actor. Well, less than 8% are even making barely minimum wage. So what appears successful, uh, a lot of acting, just like a lot of other gig jobs, it's great every now and then, but there's a lot of lows. And when you do make it high, you better save onto that, because you don't know when the next one's going to be.
Absolutely.
And mentally, you can't, you've got to stockpile those positive things, because you'll find yourself, I would be picking up my phone, calling the operator. Is my phone, is the damn thing working? I call Joni. You still, who I am, right? Well, yeah. Because you start going into the self-doubt. It's like, I must really suck that, I'm not, I don't have a good thing on the social life. My friend left me, and I can't, the last Crest commercial I went for, I didn't get,
Do you
you know,
think that that transition is the hardest for child actors, especially? Is that
it
why
is,
there's
because you were, I was never in demand. I wasn't like a celebrity child or anything like that, but I was enough in demand as far as just a working actor, that, for the days of you where it's nonstop, you go, one day you're shooting on the Paramount lot, the next day you're going over to the Desilu Studios or whatever, and you're just constantly working. You're getting to that age where now it's there's more people auditioning, so we're splitting up the pie more ways, and now that attention is diminishing. It's very tough, especially as a middle-aged child, to realize that everyone's telling me I can't do this for a living. Maybe it's true. uh,
hmm,
and if I would have listened to my family, they were actually right. It's safer, go become a doctor. Even Dawes said, this may not work out. I mean, you have fun and stuff, but what I would do, Connor, is I would get a college education. So I went back to New Mexico, and I thought, what is the easiest degree I can get? Film. I'll study film. Well, that's a hell of a thing, because you know what? Nobody in film gives a crap whether you went to college. They don't care if you went to kindergarten. So a degree in filmmaking, I mean, other than just picking up some interesting things, it's kind of useless.
sure.
Um, and furthermore, I had done it since I was a kid, and everything they were teaching to me seemed wrong. These were book smart people, professors, and I was telling them, if you went on the set and did what you're saying, you would be laughed out of Hollywood, or you'd be fired, because they don't they don't call those that, and they don't act like that when you do.
Well,
Um,
what do they say? Those that can do and those that can't teach.
I've heard that. Right? Yeah, that's absolutely. So at that time, I had talked to Karen Grassley. She came to the college and taught acting. Carol Burnett came out for a while and taught. You can't teach comedy, but Carol Burnett had done a teach-in for a season of comedy. It was funny. Her first class, she said, yeah, I can't teach comedy. So if you're not funny, then get the hell out of here. And two people left. It was like, did you really have to be told that? I mean, you really thought she was going to teach you how to be? You can't teach that. It's just like, I think acting or voiceover in general, you can't teach it. It's just either it just be like someone thinking they can sing, or someone who thinks they can mix music.
Right.
Uh, if they don't have a sense of rhythm, or they're not familiar and in love with the music, then they can't, because there's an energy. There's reading the crowd and knowing. Sod used to do this thing where he says, "See that blonde woman standing over there in the corner? I'm going to get her to the dance floor in the next song."
Right. You must,
He
you must have heard my
amazing.
SoundCloud tracks that I have out in the ether now.
Right, right, yeah. It's like he would read people. I bet she listens to this. This will get her to the dance floor, and often
Right.
he was right on cue. It's like just like the mentalism. Reading people's cues on how they access information is important. And a life hack I learned a long time ago was there was a great commercial director named Harry Hamburg. and he was. It's so hard to describe him without using curse words because that's all he was. He was a great friend of Mel Brooks, and um, can you bleep me? Is that can you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So whether he liked you or whether he hated you, you were a fucking schmuck. Everybody was. But he meant it, oh, you're a fucking schmuck. So listen to this. So whether he was talking about his wife or he might be talking about Hitler, it was, the schmuck. Well, he was such an endearing, even though he was kind of jagged. Once you got past that, you saw the puppy. I mean, he was just a wonderful human being. And I remember being so caught in myself as an actor. We were doing a Dairy Queen commercial, and I was doing the voiceover. And he said, I for some reason I thought I'm a real actor, so I had the script in front of me, and he's behind the glass, and I go, Harry, what is my motivation as an actor? For doing this commercial, what would be my motivation? And so he came forward to push the talk back. And he goes, your fucking motivation for doing this is doing it so goddamn well. I want to hire you again. That's your goddamn motivation. Thank you. Let's go. He was very direct. He never beat around. I loved him. Anyway, so I invited him to come to the college to teach a little bit about the filmmaking. And, back then commercials were all filmmaking. And he was wonderful. He didn't have any experience teaching, but he just sat around telling old stories about Bob Hope and Mel Brooks and Jack Benny. And, it was, you just sat there for 2 hours and pretended to take notes and just listen to these great stories. And
Right.
occasionally he would teach you about anamorphic lenses or loading a 35 millimeter camera, stuff like that. But, I think all those things are, again, that's that vibe that you're talking about for your podcast, where you, by sharing these stories and others that he helped, now Harry lives on through you.
Yeah.
And maybe someone who listens to this podcast, maybe they know the Harry in their life where they're like, I met someone like that he's kind of, he's like a dog. His bark is worse than his bite.
Mm-hmm.
But he was one of the few that he could do, and he could teach, even though he said he couldn't. He did teach very well. And so did Karen Grassley. I mean, she could do and she could teach, but there were so many scholars that would teach film theory that it's like, oh my God, you'd be laughed off the set if you set foot on a Walmart commercial or whatever, the fill in the blank. It's absolutely true.
You have been an amazing guest today, Connor. There's something we talked about early on, which is, you don't really like to have your face out there, and we respect that. But what I would like to say is to the people listening, this gentleman glows with his words and he glows with his wisdom. And while you can't see the body language and the smiles and connect with you on that level, I think what you've offered us today is a great serving of Connor Quinn, which had
hearty helping of Connor Quinn.
Today at 5, we're serving dessert with
tonight on NBC.
I think that these nuggets are just valuable, and it's wow. Amazing to see the toolbox that you've created and how that's kind of brought you along and propelled you forward. The other thing that resonated with me is the certain people, like even your manager, who played stepmom to a certain extent. These people that came in, there's a lot of people in my guests' lives that have those unsung heroes, whether that's a mentor or a surrogate. But the point of that is, it's important for us to play that role, whether it's coming onto a podcast and teaching that way, or if you see someone that is special and, you take them underneath your wing a little bit, it's all about that community spirit that makes us grow. And that legacy, you carry a part of all of these people that you talked about with you. just
Yeah.
like now we're carrying it with us by you sharing. And I think that's
It's
powerful.
funny. I've got one last story, and this is involving Joni, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Joni was my agent for most of my life. And you can edit this part out. I'll tell you something off the
Not a
record
problem. You bet. That's
that I'll tell you that a little bit later about something I can't discuss, but not on here. But Joni has just always been that. My mom picked her out, and my mom was from World War II generation, and uh, just had you know strange ways of saying this person or that person. She'd picked out Joni for some reason, and that's who became my agent. And I was probably 8 years old, 9 years old, and I was frustrated because I wanted to buy a toy, and Joni wouldn't let me do it, and I was mad. And I knew I did a lot of work for her, and I deserved the toy. And so I was telling one of my little friends about it, and he was like, "Well, I don't know what the problem is because she works for you." I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, she works for you. You don't work for her." I'm like, "She's my agent." He goes, "Yeah, fire her ass." I'm like, "What?" He goes, Out with the old, get someone new, and they'll buy you the toy and move on." Well, that's just exactly what I'm going to do. So I went into her office, closed the door, and I said, "You're fired." And she goes, "Oh, I'm fired?" I said, "You're fired. I can't have the Tonka truck or whatever the hell I wanted. Then either you can let me buy this with my own money, or I'm just going to fire you." And she's like, "Well, I guess you're just going to have to fire me." "Okay, well, you're fired." And she goes, "Okay." And she turned her back and she was working. And she goes, "Okay, well, don't let the door hit you in the ass. Make sure you close it on the way out." I'm like, "What?" I mean, she didn't even fight. Like, what? That now it's the reality of like, what have I done? And she's like, you can go now." Well, I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. So I went out and closed the door. You know what? I'm gonna walk out here, and it was a hell of a long way for a little boy to walk for, the William Morris agency. That was the biggest agency I could think of. Well, yeah, that's if you're Jimmy Stewart or, you know, Vincent, those people had, you know, not, normal stupid voiceover child actors did not have the William Morris agency, but I'm going to. So I walked and I walked and oh my God, it was forever. I finally get to the damn William Morris agency. And I went in, I saw the receptionist and I said, "I'm Connor Quinn, the actor." And she said, "Okay." And I said, I just got rid of my agent, and I need a new one today, right now, because I want to buy some stuff." And she said, "Okay." Cool. "We'll have a seat, and Mr. Dundridge or whatever will be right with you, Mr. Quinn." "Okay, thank you." For a few minutes later, I waited, and was reading one of their Cosmopolitan magazines. It was in the waiting room. And finally, this young guy come out and said, "Connor, step into my office." Oh my God, it was a Palladium. I mean, it was all mahogany. It went on for miles. It was the biggest room I've ever been. It was his office. So he sat a mile away from me behind his desk. "Have a seat. Would you like a cigar?" "No, thank you." "What can I do for you?" I said, "I just got rid of my agent. You probably heard of her. Her name is Joni Venari." He goes, "Oh, yeah, one of the best in the business. You're lucky to have her." "Well, I fired her." "You fired her?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Well, because I wanted such and such, and she wouldn't let me have it. So I'm coming to you, and I want you to put one of your boys to work for me." "Okay, well, tell me, what TV shows have you starred in?" I go, "Starred in? I'm a character. I haven't." He goes, "You haven't starred in any? You haven't had your own TV show?" "No." "Oh. Okay, what movies have you starred in?" I'm not a star. I've not starred in movies. I've just been a character actor in them." "Oh God." Uh, have you done Broadway?" "No, I've never been on stage in my life." "Can you sing?" "I cannot sing." "Connor, I love you to death, but there's nothing we at the William Morris Agency can do for you. If I were you, I would go back to Joni. I mean, a damn good agent. I wished I had her. I walked with my tail between my legs all the way back to Joni's office. Went in, and she says, what do you want? I thought I was fired. And I said, you're unfired. I was just kidding. And she goes, no, I'm sorry. You hurt my feelings. You can't unfire me. And I said, well, I need an agent. She goes, well, that's not my problem, is it? And I'm like, well, I want you back. And she said, a long pause. And finally, she's like, I'll think about it. It's a Friday. Be in my office Monday morning at 8 a.m. and I'll give you my decision about whether I want you or not. God, that was the worst weekend of my life, dude. Well, Monday morning, of course, she took me back and da da da. It wasn't years later till I found out that it was all a ruse. It was all bullshit. She knew everyone in town. She still knows everyone in town. As soon as I'd said the William Morris Agency, she called down that nobody can just walk in and say, oh, I want to speak to the head agent. You can't do that. She called and talked to receptionists. They put a kid from the mailroom in one of the, office suites, and he pretended like he was an agent. It was all in a thing to get me to come back, and it worked. But hell, that was a secret with her for 15 years. It was a beautiful secret.
So let me ask you this. How many agents go that extra mile? Is she just a rarity, or is this something you see more often?
Today, you don't see it hardly at all. The very few upper echelon agents will do that. Most of agents today are basically audition mills. They get a call just like a million other agents of, here's an audition, and they give it to their roster. Well, every agency across the United States gets the same audition. In my day, agents did a lot more for you. They care if she said part your hair on the left, you parted your hair on the left. You buy this type of toothpaste, I bought that type of toothpaste. Agents really seem to kind of, that's what, until the kid told me that she worked for me. I didn't know that. I thought I was working for her. I had no idea how business worked. It was just my mom had picked her out. I didn't know. And at the time, I mean, not all agents acted like that at all. Most of them were very all about business. And of course they're dealing with adults, so it's a different situation. But she had all of her, well, I mean, not all of her pets, but a big part of her roster was children. And she was in charge of a lot of them. We lived in a dormitory. It used to be a condominium, a high rise, and Mae West. It was one of the last places she lived before she died. But anyway, it was boys and girls, and she was in charge of all of us. So I don't know how she kept it together. I don't even know how I found that much time with her. When I think back to how many kids she was in charge of. And across the board, if we had a commercial shoot in Salt Lake, either she or one of her close assistants would go with us, and be right there with us. In that day and age, a lot of children would be flying all over the place with no entourage and no one to protect them. They were open to the streets. And I think that's why there were so many problems with the two Corys and River Phoenix, so many child actors who found out that Hollywood has a really, really, really dark side. Yeah. She protected us from that. If we were invited to parties, she went with us.
Is she still
so
alive?
We weren't exploited or what's that?
Is she still alive?
She's still alive. Yeah, she's still one of my agents. Yep. She's more like my manager now, but yeah, she's I run everything by her. And the funny thing is she still has a damn Rolodex. She can access it faster than I can type in Google. She can spin right to, oh yeah, his number is 465. She's still old, completely old school, but know.
Joni, that's her name, right?
Joni Venari. Yep.
Thank you. It's people like you that shape lives. And so totally. Thank you.
Yeah, I know I'm not the only, I know there's other children. I'm sure there was adults that she played a big role in their life. I talked about Paul Lynn. She had represented him for a while, and various people like that. And I'm sure she was wonderful to so many. I just it wasn't just I wasn't just the lucky one. It was all of us that got to know her. That
Yeah.
you know, she did slap me one time. And that was because I had
You
used
probably
the B.
deserved it though, right?
I did. I used the B word,
Oh,
and
yep. Nope.
uh, I can still feel it to this day. And I try not to ever use that word, because she's like, I don't ever want to hear you say that word about anyone ever again. And yeah, I'll never forget that day. Yeah, her justice was swift, but it was accurate.
She sounds like someone I'd like to talk to. She's
Oh yeah, Joni was a fantastic person.
there's never a better compliment in life than to be a teacher. I
Yeah,
think that's
true.
the profession that we respect the most, but ironically and unfortunately, usually pay the least.
The least.
And it's these are the people that shape us. It shapes our civilization, our culture, and our societies. And when you have someone like her that has that approach, I can only imagine those positive ripples that she's created. So it's
It
amazing.
totally is. As a child, I hated it, but Michael Landon was very strict with us on the set, where a lot of the other TV series that we did, you had 8-year-olds smoking. I mean, just all hell would break loose. But if you were on Little House on the Prairie, it was like a family. Same with Sesame Street, it was a family. Um, but Michael Landon, he didn't put up with BS. If you were on his set, you were either filming, you were off the set blocking and running lines with somebody, a producer, or you were with your state assigned tutor studying biology. So as a child, I hated him.
Mm,
As an adult, I thank God for him. That
hmm
it was because he had been a child actor. He knew what hell would come loose. When we were doing Sesame Street, again, you had all those big burly grips that were just, they're union guys that are just they're tired of the system. And you know just as a any film set you're on, they're just horrible attitude sometimes. Now, this is not today. I'm not saying that today. I haven't been on a film set for many years, but back then it seemed like a lot of them were unhappy, and a lot of them were underpaid and overworked, and they were very gruff, but they knew what that they were doing, and you were safe around them. Everything was great that way. But I remembered, on Sesame Street, we had these grips. Now they would work other television shows. And when Sesame Street wasn't in residence, there would be another TV show. So they would work that. So several months ago, I was asking Joni, how is it that us kids were on Sesame Street? And I don't ever remember any of those guys saying something out of character, or something bad, or being afraid of them. They were very gentle. They were very caring and wonderful people, but you could just tell, they acted other ways on around other sets.
hmm
And I said, how did that not translate doing Sesame Street? You can't pay these guys to do this. And she was asking me, do you remember a particular assistant director? And I said, yeah. And she said, what did she used to say? When you were coming out of makeup and she was coming across the set, what would she say? And I said, she said, blue skies. She would just keep saying blue skies, blue skies. And she said, what did that mean? And I said, well, we were shooting on an indoor film set. So I thought she was telling us kids, remember you're outside, you're on a street. So blue skies, here we go. And she's like, that was a code word to all those grips to shut the hell up. Don't talk about last night's conquest and, your fight with your old lady. We have kids around, stay positive, stay light. This is Sesame Street. And so that it worked. And I've talked with people recently, and they say it's still, because Sesame Street was unlike any other show. It was all made up of educators, psychologists, people that had children's best interest. So it was and is like a family. Every line that was written there would be run through an educator or a child psychologist to see what repercussions would have. Just amazing show. There's no other
Yeah.
show like it at all.
I grew up with Sesame
So
Street. Yeah. And the Electric
then, yeah,
Company, for
then
that matter. The Electric Company I was more interested in because of the Spider-Man cartoon. Just saying.
I love, I worked like 2 episodes of Electric Company, with a then unknown Morgan Freeman.
How amazing was that?
Yeah, he was completely unknown, but we were doing was playing like a mad scientist Frankenstein. He had this horrible wig. It was just, what a fascinating crew that was. You had Rita Moreno and Morgan Freeman, and just
yeah.
And they were so creative, inventive, all their little jingles, and television was, we were very fortunate to grow up. You're younger than you look. I thought I'm way the hell older than you, but if you grew up with Electric Company.
Well, so I was born in 74. I just turned 49 in March.
Oh, you're a young kid. I was born in 71. But
yeah.
you're Gen X. You're Gen X. So there's nothing better than Gen X.
Yeah, I agree. And we remember what it was like before video games, and when we used to still play outside as kids. We've seen this evolution for better and worse, kind of like that pendulum swing. We're still trying
Right.
to figure it out after this huge leapfrog advance. But it's just been a pleasure. I could continue talking to you for forever today. But how about this? How about I have the links for your description and match that I can add. Is there anything else that I can bring attention to before I let you go? And I'll edit this last little bit out so that it doesn't sound so kooky.
I guess my website, I don't have a book or anything to.
No problem.
But that's the other reason I told Joni, I was like, I don't even know why the hell I'm going. I have nothing to sell. And she's like, well, you do coaching for voiceover. They can go to your website. Maybe a producer, you might be the right guy for his documentary or whatever the hell he might be listening,
Yeah.
So I guess my website.
Okay. That's on Match, I believe. So for sure, I'll add that all to the descript.
Yeah, it's voxguy.com.
Yep. I will shoot you a link to, I'll probably have it published by the end of today or early tomorrow.
Oh my God.
So
yeah, if you would I would love to share it on LinkedIn, and I do Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you'd like to join me on LinkedIn as a friend in the network,
absolutely,
that would be great. And then I'd love to visit back with you in maybe 6 months or whatever your schedule allots, and maybe we can.
This is incredible, man. I feel like I was like on the Dick Cavett show. This is.
This has been Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany, exploring deep stories from real-life guests with real-life experiences, providing insight to our listeners with every story. Stay up to date on future podcasts by bookmarking Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany.podbean.com and follow Bo on social media by searching Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Have an idea for a future story? Send your idea to acrmadison@gmail.com. Until next time, grab life by the horns and keep inspiring others.